Good morning, New York Giants fans. We have a surprising, shocking, stunning, unbelievable victory Thursday to talk about here on the Big Blue View podcast, the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube, and here to help me talk about it. You can tell I'm a little groggy this morning, a couple hours of sleep, not too much, but I'm here. Tony DelGenio is here. Tony didn't have much more sleep than I did, but we're here and let's talk Giants. Tony,
great morning to talk Giants.
How much sleep did you get?
Oh, 3.5, 4 hours. I'm not somebody that drops off to sleep immediately anyway. And to be honest, after that game, hard to calm down enough to go to sleep.
I hear you. It's I did not expect to be talking about a victory on this Friday morning here on the Valentine's Views podcast. Not a single one of us tells you how much we know about the New York Giants at Big Blue View, Tony. On Sunday, none of us picked the Giants to lose. On Thursday, none of us picked them to win. What do we know? We don't know anything. But we're happy in our ignorance, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, not just a victory, but I mean they really kind of dominated them at least in the second half last night. So I mean, it's not like they squeezed out a victory with a lucky play. They were the better team last night.
Absolutely, this was a dominant victory, and I thought there was a point at the beginning of the second half where I thought your typical Giants would have started to fold. They come out in the second half and they, if I remember correctly, did they have a slim lead at the half, Tony? I forget.
Yeah, I think they had a slim lead at the half.
They had, I think, a 17. They had 20, at the 20, half. 20, they had a 2017 lead at the half, is what they had, and they come out in the third quarter, and they have a 3rd and 2. The Giants get the ball to start the half, and Jackson Dart throws a pass down the field to Theo Johnson, which would have been a first down, in Eagles territory, and Theo Johnson drops it. And I'm thinking, with the last 10 or 12 years of Giants history in mind, I'm thinking, oh boy, there we go with the Giants giving up this game. And that didn't happen. And they sealed it. I thought it was still in doubt until Cordell Flott picked off Jalen Hurts there at the in the fourth quarter. But really encouraging performance by the Giants, stunning after they lost to the Saints on Sunday. And I don't know if you saw it, but in our Slack room, Chris Flum of Big Blue View dropped this morning. What is it about the Giants that they can only beat teams with winning records? Mm-hmm. Since they beat the Chargers and they beat the Eagles, but I don't know.
Well, what it really is that the Giants can only win at home, right? because the Giants are losing all these games on the road, and at home they beat the Chargers, and at home they beat the Eagles, and that's just the opposite of what the Giants have been the last couple of years when they've saved their biggest stinkers to play in front of their home fans.
Well, what's interesting, you talk about winning at home when you're starting to try to establish something, which the Giants still are. Okay, when you're starting to try to establish something, I think one of the first things you want to establish is that you can win at home. And a couple of weeks ago against the Chargers, there were a couple of "Let's go Giants" chants and all of that. There were in the stadium on Thursday night. There were "Let's go Giants" chants in the middle of the first quarter. There was a different vibe, a different attitude. And I think the first thing you need to establish if you're going to be a good football team is that home is home and you have an advantage. And it's the first time, I've covered Giants-Eagles games at MetLife for the last 10 or 12 years. And it's the first time I can ever remember feeling like this was a Giants home crowd. And that was, from a Giants perspective, that's a great feeling.
And just the whole flow of the game. And they took that early, I guess it was 13-3 lead. And you said, well, it's looking pretty good tonight. And then the Eagles started to come back on them and started to control the ball more, and you say, okay, the Eagles are figuring things out, and the Giants aren't moving the ball now after the early success. The Fangio has figured out what to do to keep them from going. But then they got that touchdown drive just before halftime that I thought was such an important thing, because it reestablished, to me anyway, that they were going to be competitive in this game, and that they hadn't just been figured out, and the early success was just a fleeting thing. So I think they went into the half maybe with some confidence after that touchdown drive, as you say, having a lead at halftime. And then, you always worry in the second half that the opponent's going to make some adjustment or something like that, and things are going to be different. And as you say, they played some of their best ball in the third quarter, really. And it's just a shocking thing. And, you hear how loud MetLife can be when the Giants are really playing well, and you kind of remember back to the great teams and the way home field used to be such an advantage for the Giants in the glory days. It's been so many years since we saw that.
Absolutely. It was 14-0 Giants in the second half, and that for me is a stunning result against a team that won the Super Bowl a year ago, albeit the Eagles of 2025 don't seem to be the Eagles of 2024. But Tony, we have to talk about Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo. And I don't even want to talk about numbers. I don't want to talk about individual plays, but the impact. And we talked to player after player after player in the locker room last night about the impact of these two players. And what I wrote this morning at Big Blue View was, the Giants have gone through three general managers in the last 10 or 12 years. They've gone through almost a half a dozen head coaches. They've overhauled the roster, I don't know how many times. They keep shuffling offensive linemen and defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators. They have been searching and searching and searching for the player or the coach or the person or the people that are going to bring change to this franchise. And I can't help but think that in Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo, they might have found them. The energy, the enthusiasm, the willingness to lead as rookies who have never done this before. The willingness to basically grab this team by the bootstraps and haul it and pick it up is something that everybody in the locker room I talked to last night feels, understands, and appreciates. And maybe, just maybe, the Giants have found the guys that can finally make them truly relevant again.
Yeah, and for Scatterbo, I think it's the same thing that he did in college. And if you watched any of his stuff in college, he's exactly the same player that he was. Dart, to me, and it's not that I watched that much of Jackson Dart when he was at Ole Miss, but to me, Dart looks like a better player than I saw the few times I watched him at Ole Miss. And I've been actually kind of amazed at how quickly he's taken to the pro game, and how he's not being fooled by defenses. It seems to me, it looks to me like he's not being fooled by defenses. He's making the right reads. He's throwing into tight spots, and the two of them together just bring an energy to the Giants offense that they haven't had in ages. The Giants as a franchise have always been the tone has always been set by their defense. even in the Super Bowl years, the tone was set by the defense, and the offense would come along and make great plays sometimes, but it was always the defense kind of controlling things. On this Giants team, the defense is doing its part, but the offense is looking like it can be an equal partner, which would be an amazing thing if that continues.
It's interesting when we talk about Dart, because there were some people that loved Dart. There were some people that didn't, coming out of the draft. The thing about, think about great Giants quarterbacks through history, and I don't want to say right now that Jackson Dart is a great quarterback. He's played 3 NFL games, but I think about Y.A. Tittle. Okay, going all the way back to that. I think about Phil Simms. I think about Eli Manning. And one of the common characteristics of all of those guys, you remember the famous photo of Y.A. Tittle, right? The bloody photo of Y.A. Tittle. What I think about when I think about all of those guys is toughness, leadership, the willingness to stand in there and make plays. And it's very, very early, but I think we're seeing that toughness from Jackson Dart. And I think part of that is infectious, just like Cam Scatabo is infectious. And the two of them, they locker next to each other. They spend tons of time together. They want to be the guys that lift this team. And, but just in terms of Dart, when I think about Giants quarterbacks that have truly been successful, he's got that toughness characteristic. And Jermaine Illuminor last night, I asked Jermaine Illuminor, I said, Jermaine, would it be nice if your quarterback got through a game without having to go to the tent for a concussion check? and when he got done laughing, he said, I would like that. He said, but I think it just fires the kid up, taking those hits and all of that. I think it just fires the kid up. So, he loves the contact. He loves to get hit. He loves to compete. He threw himself at a linebacker last night, going to get a first down.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're looking at people in the press row and we're going, the kid is just insane. The kid's crazy. Scatabo's crazy, and it's a good kind of crazy for both of them. And it is lifting the Giants locker room and changing the attitude in there. And that's something the Giants have needed for a long, long time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he's got to be a little bit smart about that. And hopefully they'll both learn, but especially Dart will learn that he's got to kind of pick his spots to be that aggressive and not give himself an unnecessary chance of being injured. And I'm looking at the comments and saying, looking forward to a day when there are not referendums on the GM, head coach, and defensive coordinator every week. And that's true. And they haven't gotten there yet, because they could go to Denver next Sunday and lay an egg again, and then we'll have the same questions. I don't think they have to win in Denver, but what I think they have to do is to be competitive in Denver, because Denver is a good team with a good offense, and they can be a playoff team this year. It's not an easy place to win, but you just want to see them not stinking up the joint, right? And that's the thing. You can lose games, but if you lose a hard-fought game to an opponent who plays well also, then you just tip your cap and you say, well, that's the NFL. You're not going to win them all. That's what they need next week. And if they do that, and part of that is keeping Dart healthy, right? Because it's obvious the spirit that he brings to that offense, and you need that on the field. You don't need that in the blue tent every game.
Right. And it's just, you don't need what they put on the field in New Orleans, on Sunday. And I think with a young developing team, you're going to get some stinkers, but you're right. If they go on the road, play a quality game against Denver, That's progress. I'm really interested to see what happens in 2 weeks against the Eagles, in Philly. Those are strong tests for the Giants. But, to Chris's point about the referendums on the GM and the head coach and the defensive coordinator and all of that, it's funny because I was thinking about that last night after the game. It's a roller coaster ride. And it really is a roller coaster ride. And I think that what the last 3 weeks have shown us is maybe that's what it's going to be for a while. When you're building around a young quarterback and your roster isn't whole and your best offensive player, is out with a torn ACL, it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride. But I think what we have finally seen, with the victories over the Chargers and last night against the Eagles, is maybe there's light at the end of that tunnel. I think maybe the guys that can take the Giants out of this malaise that they've been in for so long, maybe those guys are finally on the roster. And, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're at that point where we're talking a few days ago about could Shane Bowen lose his job if the Giants put up a stinker last night? And now that's the farthest thing from everybody's mind. But we all tend to overreact. We react to the last thing that we saw. But I think, for me, I think the thing that people have to understand at this point is it's a process, but maybe this time, there's real light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and I'm looking at one of the other comments, and the concern about the players tuning out the coaches, which I think is a real concern on any losing team, and I think that's why a win like last night's is so important, because I can't put myself in a player situation, but you have to think that what the coaches are having you do works against a good team, then that's what contributes to you not tuning out the coaches. So you want the to feel that the coaches have a plan. And I think on this team, that was, if it was a concern, it would be more a concern for the defensive players, because the defensive coordinator is getting so much criticism for the kind of vanilla defense he was putting out there. But it seemed like last night they did some more interesting things last night, and they were back to doing stunts, and one of them led to a Brian Burns sack. Burns and Carter did a stunt, and Burns got the sack on that. They were doing simulated pressures and things like that, and so I think you want to see that your defensive coordinator is trying to kind of pull out the stops and do some clever things to put you in a position to succeed. And I think you had to worry after last week that maybe he wasn't doing that. And so that's one of the good signs, I thought, last night. And I don't worry about that so much with the offense, but still, I think it's a concern going forward. And I would imagine the players need to feel like the coaches are putting them in the best situation to succeed too.
Absolutely. And I will admit to having also worried that, it's been 2.5 years of losing, and a lot of the guys in the locker room have been through all of that. And you begin to worry about the guys in the locker room tuning out the message from the head coach. And I've been wondering if the Giants had begun to tune Brian Daboll out. And I found it interesting last night in talking to Tyler Nubin, Giants safety, after the game, that I did not ask him about Brian Daboll, but he went out of his way to praise Brian Daboll for preaching ever since OTAs, ever since they began practicing this year, for preaching the message of, we're not just here to play. We are here to go win football games. He said he started preaching that at practices, in team meetings. Winning is the message. And I think we can question a lot of things, and maybe there are still players in the locker room that have tuned him out. It's kind of human nature when you've been through losing for years and years and years. But I thought it was interesting that Tyler went out of his way to praise Daboll for the message that he's been delivering and the energy that he has brought himself this year. So that was just because, as I said, I've wondered if guys are beginning to tune him out as well.
Yeah, and of course, naturally, that's what winning will do for you. It'll give you some confidence in the coaching staff that they're putting you into positions. The difference with this Giants team is that they're accumulating talent, right? And we're starting to see that. And I think that's one of the frustrations with the start that they got off to this year, even though they were mostly playing good teams. That it seemed like there was more talent in the building than we were seeing on the field. But last night, and against the Chargers as well, you saw that talent come up with big plays at big times, and you started to say, yeah, these are guys that I thought were good players, and they're doing good things. Brian Burns is having one hell of a season. So far, Kayvon Thibodeau is playing better than he played before. They finally had the sense to bring little Jordan Humphrey up, and little Jordan Humphrey made several big plays for them last night. And I think doing those things gives you confidence that the talent that you think you see around the locker room, and I'm just guessing, I've never been in an NFL locker room, gives you confidence that the talent that you see in the locker room actually can be exploited by the coaching staff to win games. And that's why you need games like this one and the one against the Chargers.
Absolutely. There was a Jalen Hyatt sighting last night, a couple of catches from Jalen Hyatt. As you said, finally, they got little Jordan Humphrey to the roster, and made some. You appear to have a fan in Vinny Scam.
I know
you appear to have a fan.
I catch you, Vinny.
So, all right. Anyway, it was nice to see the Giants be creative enough to get the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson in open space, to get the ball to little Jordan Humphrey, to use that big 6'4", 225-pound body. It was nice to see, and props to Mike Kafka for this. When Keely Ringo went out of the game for a little while for the Eagles, Adoree Jackson came in the game. And right away, it was, we're throwing the ball right at Adoree Jackson. Okay, it was, we know this guy. We know that we can complete passes against this guy. And all of a sudden, Jalen Hyatt became a factor. So, props to Mike Kafka for exploiting what they saw as a weakness. Props for getting the ball to little Jordan Humphrey, and for moving the ball around. And props to the Giants for finally ending the torture of watching Cordale Flott come off the field for Deonte Banks on third down. And I have to say this, I found it. We talked to Cordale after the game last night, and I loved hearing him speak about the interception of Jalen Hyatt at the end of the game. He said, I knew precisely what they were going to do. He said, I knew from formation. I knew from their splits. I knew from the situation. I knew they were going to throw the quick out. I knew the ball was coming at me. I knew the quick out was coming, and he jumped it. And that was really the game clinching play. I just loved it because that tells you he's still a young player. You realize, I think he's still only 23 years old, and he's been on the team for what, a decade and a half now. Seems like he's been on the team forever. But I loved listening to him talk about absolutely knowing, what was coming and how he was able to recognize it, because that's professionalism, to study and learn and look at what the opposition is presenting you with, and making a play. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, and the Giants just haven't had enough of those playmaking guys in the secondary for a few years now. Really, not since James Bradbury, I think, had his really good first year as a Giant. Have they had those playmakers? I just wanted to go back. You mentioned Jordan Humphrey and Jalen Hyatt. I thought this was Jalen Hyatt's best game as a Giant, even though, I mean, he only got something like 17 yards, but he caught an important contested third down, or not third down, a contested catch, and then caught another catch, and then he drew a defensive pass interference on I think it was on Keely Ringo in the end zone that led to one of their touchdowns. And there's a guy that I thought has been basically left for dead. I mean, he's done nothing since his first year when it looked like he had some promise, and I thought that was a really important thing for him to have that little bit of success in key situations. And as far as Humphrey goes, I really think an offense cannot be successful without at least one big X type wide receiver. There. And that's what Humphrey gives them. And you saw that early in the game when Dart went right to him with a ball that was up in the air that only a tall guy could go up and catch. And he did that for a first down. And so, these are the types of things you want to see from an offense that make you think that the team has been put together correctly, and that they're starting to be used correctly too. And that's another thing. And as far as Cordell Flott goes, he's had such a funny career, because I'd never heard of him when the Giants drafted him in the third round. And as you said, he was really, really young when he got drafted. And he's made the occasional big play, like in the playoff game against Minnesota. Everybody remembers the fourth down pass that Xavier McKinney held Hawkinson to 3 yards on 4th and 8 to win the game. But the play before, Cordell Flott knocked a pass out of the hands of, I think it was KJ Osborne, to set up that fourth down. So he's had his moments, and if he can actually become that CB2 in this defense, then that's a huge thing, because they don't really have a lot of other places to turn right now. And thank goodness that the Giants are finally just putting what they think are the best players out there, and not necessarily putting players out there just because they're high draft picks.
Absolutely. And just Cordell Flott is still, he just turned 24 years old in August. I'm looking at it right now. He's in his 4th NFL season. And, Tyler Nubin said to me last night, he said, Nubin's in his 2nd year. He said, Cordell Flott is still younger than I am. And so he's still a very young player. And I think he was the youngest player on the roster for 2 years. So, props to him for continuing to work and all of that. I did, as Vinny Scam points out, I did kind of feel bad for Russell Wilson. 2 plays, 1 horribly incomplete pass, and Russell Wilson was getting booed last night. So I felt bad for Russ, but yeah, thank goodness for Jackson Dart. So, because that has just changed. Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo have basically changed everything about the air, about the feeling around this football team. So hopefully it continues, Tony, and we shall see. We have a week and a half to enjoy this one.
Yeah, right. Much better to have that week and a half off after you've had an uplifting win over a hated division rival, than imagine if the week and a half had come after the Saints game.
The only last thing I will say is our buddy Vinny Scam, who seems to be filling up the comments here, made a point about the offensive line rounding into form. And here's what I'll say about that is it helps when you have a great player at left tackle. And Andrew Thomas had his worst game last night, which might not have been surprising since it was a Thursday night and he's still coming off that Lisfranc injury. He had his worst game last night, and it was still an excellent game. His worst game since he came back. And, I've said for a while, this offensive line would be, if not fantastic, this offensive line would be okay. It would be functional. It would be good enough once Andrew Thomas came back, if he was still Andrew Thomas. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think Jackson Dart's legs and his escapability help that too. But we're seeing a lot of positives, and the offensive line play is one of them.
Yeah, and I didn't, I thought the Giants' offensive line did every bit as well, if not better, than the Eagles' offensive line. And granted, they were missing Landon Dickerson, but yeah, one of the things that nobody's talking about from last night's game is that Saquon Barkley was a non-factor in the game, pretty much, right? And the Giants defensive line did a good job, and linebackers and did a good job on Barkley last night. And you think about that compared to last year's game against the Eagles, when Barkley kind of ran wild against the Giants.
Saquon had 31 yards on his first 2 touches, 18 yards and then 13 yards. And I think everybody thought, oh no, here we go. And then I think he gained 27 yards the rest of the game. And I just remember watching, and there were a few instances where he either caught passes or was handed the ball. And I thought, he's got a little bit of room. And the Giants got him on the ground. We talked about Cordell Flott. There was a huge third down play in the second half. I think it might have been in the fourth quarter, where they tossed a swing pass out to Barkley. And it was like a short yardage situation. And Cordell Flott came up one-on-one and took Barkley down for a loss. So yes, the Giants did a great job on Barkley. It was nice to see. It was kind of nice to put some of the Barkley stuff to rest last night, especially after the documentary came out on Thursday morning, in which Barkley's bitterness toward the Giants over the contract negotiations was fully evident. So it was just nice. It's a good feeling. Like I said, I think a lot to feel good about with this Giants team. This doesn't mean they're going to go on a run and win 10 games in a row, but I fingers crossed that we're finally beginning to see, something that tells us that brighter days are ahead. We've been fooled before. We have been fooled before. Let's be realistic about that. But I think maybe this time, maybe this time will be the time that we don't get fooled, and that things actually do turn for the better.
Yeah, and everyone said that the beginning of the Giants' schedule, the first half of their schedule, was by far the toughest for them, and they've survived it. I mean, 2-4 doesn't sound great. They really could have been 4-2 with a couple of better plays here and there, but they're not getting blown out by anyone. They're playing all of these teams that were considered good teams, and they haven't been blown out by a single one of them. And they played the Eagles, they played Kansas City, they played the Chargers, and they're hanging in there in games. So it's a shame they're not at least 3-3 now, but a couple more weeks of playing good teams, this time on the road, and then they get to the softer part of their schedule. And so it's not out of the question that they could be a 500 team, even a 9-8 team, if they manage to gel and avoid injuries, right? And obviously you wait and see going forward, but they just look more competent this season than they have in a while.
They look like a football team. They look like an actual, honest-to-goodness, competent football team. At least they did in weeks 4 and week 6. They certainly didn't in week 5. But Tony, we have a week and a half to enjoy to enjoy this one. And as for me, I'm off to Cape Cod with Mrs. Big Blue View for a couple of days. We're gonna get away from Big Blue View. We're gonna get away from Giants football for most of a couple of days, and and go and enjoy a couple days in one of our favorite places. So with that, I think that's a good spot to call it a day, unless you have anything else you wanted to add quickly before we wrap it up.
Nope, just enjoy your vacation, rest up.
All right, yeah, because there's still a lot of games to play and a lot of work to do, and I'm sure that there will be dark days along with some of the good ones. But folks, enjoy enjoy thinking about a victory for the next week and a half. So with that, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.